Hello and welcome to Get When Riding, the channel where we discuss all things motorcycles and some things that have absolutely nothing to do with motorcycles. Today I am doing a comparison between Ride5 and MotoGP 2025. Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you haven't noticed, it's pretty cold outside. -3 it was this morning when I woke up, which means absolutely no opportunity to ride anything with two wheels unless you're insane. I'm sure some of you are out there doing that. So what do you do in winter when you're bored and you can't get out on your bike? Well, obviously you sit and watch motorcycle related movies, old reruns of MotoGP and World Superbikes, or you jump on your Xbox, your PlayStation or your PC and you start gaming. I made a video very recently about the impending launch of the new Ride 6 game, and one of the things that came out of that video was a lot of people asking me whether I thought that the current Ride 5 game or the MotoGP game for 2025, which one was better, which one was more realistic, and so on and so forth. And I have a PC and an Xbox, and I'm regularly online playing those games, so I thought I would take the opportunity to put up a bit of a comparison between the two games so that you can understand, if you're out there and you're shopping for a game to pass the time over winter, which one is right for you. So let's jump straight into it. So we jumped straight into the gameplay with MotoGP on the left and Ride5 on the right. Now immediately the graphical differences in these games are apparent. MotoGP for some reason has a much higher saturation and a really nice colour gradient compared to the bleached look of Ride5, and I'm not sure why that would be the case given the fact that both these games are designed by Milestone and both use the same graphics engine. If you look at the backgrounds at this track, which is Mugello, it looks totally different, night and day. There's so much more detail in the MotoGP game, so much more texture, much richer colours and a lot more detail, which is surprising because when you play Ride 5 you don't necessarily realise that there's any real lack of detail, and I'm not really sure why that would be the case with this game, because they're so close in terms of how they're developed. Right, so let's jump into photo mode, shall we? So this is a mode that both games have when you're watching a replay that allow you to pause the game to take a snapshot. And it's just like real life. You can use a number of filters, improve the exposure and brightness and so on and so forth. But I like to use it to stop the game and actually have a bit of a poke around. So when you zoom in, there's a few things that you notice straight away. There's a really nice texture on the road. You can see the skid marks and a bit of loose rubber sitting there on the edge of the track on the curbs. The details and the textures in the leather all look really good. I'd say my only complaint is that the gloss paint looks a little bit more satin, but first world problems, eh? Tyre doesn't really show any degradation. Perhaps that's because I'm only a lap in. There is a bit of an issue there with the sprocket, as you can see. Bit of a graphics glitch there, but on the whole the graphics look really good in my opinion. Now switching over to MotoGP, the only way you can access the replay is if you're in a race. You can't do a replay as far as I can tell on a time trial, so I've switched over to race mode, gone into the replay, and again you've got this photo function. And one of the first things I noticed is that the gamma needs correcting. Now you set this up at the beginning of the race, but I'm just going to go ahead now and change it and add a bit more contrast, and this is probably how the game should have been set up. And now that the gamma's been corrected, you can see all the really nice textures. Again, the paint looks a bit like satin. It doesn't really look like gloss. Gloss should almost look mirror finish. There should be a lot more reflection on it, and maybe that's one of the reasons why it looks the way that it does. But again, all the textures look really nice. The tarmac looks fully textured. The grass actually has some dimension to it, unlike Ride where it is completely flat, as is the gravel and stuff like that. All the bikes are super detailed. You can see all of the leather texture, tyre texture. Looks really cool. These MotoGP bikes look absolutely nuts when you see them up close like this. So you can't really appreciate all of the aerodynamic stuff that are on these bikes when you watch them on TV, because they're going past the camera. One other thing that I've noticed is if you look at the tyres are showing signs of compression. So there you can just see the tyre compressed on the back of Jack Miller's bike there, and that's something that you don't see on the Ride5 game. So I do think MotoGP just has the edge graphically here. So back over to Ride5, and this time we're on a Ducati Panigale V4 bike I know particularly well. We're not using our throttle hand at all, apparently. It must just be an automatic scooter, and instead of braking he just released the brake there. But we won't hold it against Ride5. There's a few glitches that are like that you'll see quite often in the game, which are somewhat frustrating. Now this is demonstration of some of the different onboard views, all of which I find completely useless for playing, but I do find quite fun to watch back in the replay mode. So here we are again with MotoGP, with all the same kind of onboard modes and a couple of other camera views that I'll switch between. So you got this one on the bottom of the fork stanchion that shows all the fork travel, which is quite cool. Some of these you would see in the real TV footage. I really like this one because you can see all the lighting effects. So the sun being above us, you can see glistening off the levers, shows all the lever effects, shows how shiny the tank are. I know they're subtle things, but I really like them. Again, this is a really popular one that you'll see on the TV all the time, where the horizon lock is on. We've got similar functions on the GoPro that we use for filming the bikes. Again, this is one that you'd probably see on the TV camera view. Note the reflections and stuff, and the paint textures, which are really nice. This one obviously is just like a traditional chase. You got the one from the shoulder cam, which Quartararo I believe actually did have in MotoGP a season ago, which is again really cool. I'm not sure if they used that last year. And then obviously you've got the traditional TV views as well. So one area that I think Ride5 absolutely trumps MotoGP is here in the wet. Now I have added some more saturation to this video, granted, just to do it a bit more justice, because it was very washed out. Now I think you could correct that with the right settings on your TV, but just look at this in photo mode. It is almost photo perfect. Absolutely beautiful. All of the beading all over the bike, it's on the screen, it's on the rider's visor. Looks absolutely stunning in my opinion. And as we pan around, you can see it all over the front tyre. The front tyre is absolutely soaking wet. We won't talk about the handling characteristics of this bike in the wet without wet tyres. It handles exactly as it would do in the dry, but don't let that take away from it. Look, you can even see the moisture on the track. Love it. I'm really impressed with this mode. And when we compare it with MotoGP, MotoGP just doesn't stack up. Check this out. So again, exactly the same place in Mugello on a Moto3 bike with CF Moto. Loads of water spray. The track effects look pretty cool. But if you look at the front of the bike, there is not a drop of rain on that visor on the front of the bike at all. Yeah, I just don't get it. I don't understand how Milestone can design two games and just for them to be so visually different. I really don't understand it. There just seems to be like a lack of attention to detail. Maybe there's different teams working on it. Don't know. So here's another area Ride does very well. This is the night racing mode. All of the race modified bikes in Ride5 are endurance bikes, so they have lights on them so you can ride them at night. There are a couple of bikes that don't have lights and it won't allow you to choose the night mode, but fundamentally with Ride5 you can race at night, dawn, dusk. You can turn the rain on, off, have it cloudy, sunny, whatever you like, and the weather effects, the environmental effects are very good. But I would say, again, if you flick over to MotoGP, you race at Losail, which I believe is in Doha, in the low light, under the floodlights. I'd say the lighting effects are just a little bit better. I'll leave you to decide. Ride5 being more sim-based has excellent ride dynamics, and it won't be long until you're sliding sideways like a maniac at every single apex and popping the occasional wheelie. Although sometimes Ride just does things that are, well, just weird. Sometimes you just crash inexplicably and end up rolling around, kind of gibbering inside the bikes and jabbering all over the place, and then sometimes you expect to crash and you just don't, and then sometimes things just get away from you. Yeah. Joking aside, I think Ride5 gets the blend of realism, simulation and playability bang on. It is easy to pick holes in it, like getting rear-ended and not falling off, but it would be super easy for Milestone to create a monster that is so realistic that no one would want to play it. After all, we do all play video games as an escape from reality, don't we? Ride5 also has some in-game realism settings that you can change. For example, the bikes do feature tyre wear, and you can turn this on or off, and the tyre wear is relative to the race lengths. And also the bikes come with switchable traction control, ABS, anti-wheelie, which you can vary to different degrees throughout the game. I do find it slightly odd that every single bike in the game comes with this, given the fact that an RGV 500 definitely didn't have traction control. But hey, first world problems, eh? So jumping across into MotoGP 2025, the first thing you immediately notice, particularly at Mugello at top speed at 350 kilometers an hour, is the fact that the bike will not turn, and that is due to the aerodynamic effect of all the wings on the bike and the ride height device. The other thing that you notice straight away is the difference in braking characteristics because of the carbon discs. You jump off of Ride5 and the bikes will turn at speed with the brakes on a moderate amount, but with the carbon discs you have to start releasing the brakes for the bike to start turning. And one of the things that always happens to me when I jump off of Ride5 onto MotoGP 2025 is I start running wide on every single corner until I readjust my brain for the braking. The other characteristic around the braking is the rear brake. So the rear brake you have to be a lot more gentle with in MotoGP. If you try to brake with a rear brake as you would do in Ride5, you just end up flying over the handlebars, which I think is a bit excessive, but hey, that's just how the game is programmed. Other realism settings include tyre wear, tyre management, the same as it does in Ride5. You've got traction control, anti-wheelie, engine brake control and power control, which you can modify in the game. And when you're racing, fuel does come into it as well, so you need to pick the appropriate amount of fuel and the appropriate mapping for your riding style, because if you're over revving and sliding everywhere, you will absolutely run out with fuel. Well, it's just embarrassing, really. So one area where MotoGP does top Ride5 is with damage. Now this is Johan Zarco's bike at Le Mans after I've smashed him into every barrier, and as you can see there's lots and lots of visual damage compared to Ride5, where you might be lucky to see a scratch. Another place where the two games differ dramatically is in the way that you set the bikes up. Obviously this gives you a much more realistic experience, and you can set the bikes up manually on MotoGP in the same way that you can do on Ride. But you can also use the guided function. So this is effectively where you use your crew chief for exactly what they would be doing for you in real life. You tell them where the problem is, in this case oversteering. He gives you some advice, you take that advice, he tells you basically what he's done to the bike, and then you can go back out, you know, perhaps in one of the free practices or qualifying, and it'll either work or it won't work. Another realism setting comes from tyre compounds. There are recommendations depending on the track temperatures and stuff like that, and sometimes you can take a gamble on a softer compound if you know that you are going to be more gentle on the. Ride5 has a suck it and see policy when it comes to setting up bikes. Whilst it does tell you the causality of the changes that you're making, sometimes you just have to change things and go out and see if it works for you. Whilst some things are immediately obvious what they do, other things might not be, and so taking to the internet and forums will help you to get a decent setup or a good base setting. For the Season Pro, this is an absolute must to improve your lap times. Now, Ride5 being sim-based does have some advantages in the sense that with MotoGP, everything is licensed, so there's a limited amount of things that you can modify. But with Ride5, I like the fact that you can change things like tyres, brake, suspension, and that they have a physical effect on the bike in the game, notably so. One of the downsides of these modifications that I've found is when you change the exhaust note in the game doesn't change, and there's just silly little things like that that let this feature of the bike down. I like the fact that it changes the bike cosmetically. If you change the brake disc, for example, change the wheels, the bike looks physically different. And then after this, you can also go on to change the colorway, change the decals, and it visually changes the bike. The game also gives you the option to create 4 riding kit profiles that you can vary depending on what bike you're riding. You can choose from a range of licensed kit, helmet, gloves, boots, etc., and set your riders up however you like. In addition to that, you can also choose your riding style from a selection of 4 different styles. Similarly, MotoGP allows you to customize your own rider, the difference being that you can choose some of the official riders and then modify their kit, or choose to set your own up from the beginning from scratch. Now you can change your helmet, gloves, boots, etc. exactly the same as Ride. This also has the functionality to design your own stickers, create your own helmets and things like that. All that can be applied to your rider individually. Very, very similar to how it works in Ride5. Ride5 and MotoGP pretty much have the same game structure in the sense that they both have career, time trial, free race where you can create pretty much any scenario that you want, online multiplayer, and a dual screen multiplayer. Where MotoGP is slightly different is that you can design your own career path and choose what level you start at, pick a team, and it's kind of like a player manager style back end where you slowly rise your way through the ranks, and if you continue the game through its entirety, you can eventually work your way up to ride for a factory team with your created rider. And it's something that looks really good visually in the game and gives you a real sense of achievement. Whereas in Ride5, I kind of feel like the career modes get a little bit repetitive. It is just series after series after series. And the one thing that you've got to look forward to in terms of rewards is the unlocks. So you complete this series of bikes and you get this amount of credits, allowing you to buy more bikes and potentially a bonus bike that you may or may not have wanted and you can't sell for any money anyway. As an added bonus, you do get some additional play modes in MotoGP, including Supermoto similar to Ride5, Flat Track which you can see here, and some mini moto racing as well. You can choose all the official or unofficial riders that you've created to go a bit nuts and let loose. These games lack depth and are really just for a bit of fun. They don't really add anything to the game in my opinion. They're literally just for a quick 5-minute sesh with your mates online if you want to have a bit of a crack. Now sound is super important for a simulation game. For some bikes like the 999, they got it bang on. Listen to the dry clutch. Perfect. 2-stroke bikes, yes, they all sound very similar, but even that, they got the sound pretty much bang on, I would say. And there are some bikes that they really must have had to go out of their way to get the right sound for example. There isn't a sound in the world like the sound of a Honda V4 engine, is there? That is absolutely unmistakable. But then, how did they get certain bikes like this just so wrong? Granted, I did spend a bit of time on the gravel there, but for every bike that sounds amazing, there's one that sounds absolutely terrible, and that is just something you've got to live with in these games, unfortunately. And it's a similar story for MotoGP. So here we have the Yamaha cross-plane crank Big Bang engine, and it's one of the most unmistakable engine notes of any bike that I think I've ever heard in the modern era. And somehow it just sounds synthetic. This is Marc Marquez's GP25, and again it just sounds a little bit like an angry bee rather than the rip snorting V4 that we're all used to hearing dominating the championship this year. And it's just a little bit disappointing. It's just a bit artificial feeling, and again, maybe I'm being overly critical here, but these little details, the sum of their parts, just to make up the gaming experience. And out of the two, I would say that the Ride5 created team seemed to go a little bit further in capturing the sounds correctly. Maybe that's because with MotoGP bikes, they weren't given as much time with the bikes to be able to record the sounds accurately, and maybe they had to synthesize the sounds. Who knows? If anyone knows, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments below. So that's it then. You've heard me prattle on about these games for quite a long time now, and we've covered off most of the different elements of the games that I really wanted to talk about. So, in conclusion, where do you go? You know, who are these games for? So, Ride5, I think I made a good case for the fact that Ride5 is very much a simulation. If you're into realism, if you're a biker yourself, and you want something that kind of looks and feels like the real thing, but is still quite good fun to play, then Ride5 could be the game for you. It lacks a little bit of depth, and the career mode is quite repetitive, but the selection of bikes is very good. They're highly customizable, and the DLC content is very, very good as well. So you can really customize the game. Quite recently I downloaded all of the British Superbike liveries, the leather liveries, and actually joined an online play where we were basically replicating the BSB season. And that was absolutely fantastic. There's a good variety of tracks and quite a lot of variation, but like I say, the career play can get somewhat monotonous. You really have to be in it to unlock all the DLCs and stuff like that, and that's another issue in itself with Ride5. It can be quite costly if you are downloading all of the DLC content. I reckon I'm in it for well over £100 with all the DLC content. That's not to say that eventually it doesn't get released for free anyway, but that is definitely something to bear in mind. If you're just a die-hard racing fan, then maybe MotoGP could be for you. It's a lot more arcadey in the way that it works, but the career is a lot more rewarding to play. Think of it a little bit like a football manager game where you kind of self-manage this new up-and-coming rider through Moto3, Moto2, eventually ended up in MotoGP, and it actually is quite rewarding to play. There's a kind of couple of sub-game modes, if you like, with the Supermoto, the Motard, flat tracking, and then obviously the Mini Moto, which are quite fun and good fun to just knock around on if you've got nothing better to do and want to kill a few minutes, but there's no real depth to those at all. I think graphically, hard to say. If you can get the right saturation and contrast levels on your TV with Ride, I would say the Ride graphics hold up, but definitely the environment and everything like that, the crowds that you get, the additional sound effects, and the much better backgrounds that you get with MotoGP. Maybe MotoGP just has the edge over it, but these games, whilst they're both motorcycle games, really do suit kind of different gameplay moods, if you like. I do like having both games, and it's a luxurious position to be able to have both for sure, but if you're going to pick one or the other, watch this video and just use the information to decide which is the right game for you. I'm really looking forward to the release of Ride 6. I released a video on the Ride 6 gameplay footage quite recently, and there'll be a link to that in the description below. If you want more Ride 6 updates, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. There will be a Ride 6 launch day release on February the 12th, but I think I'm getting the early release version, so it'll be 5 days before that. So keep your eyes peeled. I'm hoping that some of the things that irritated me about Ride 5 will actually be fixed in Ride 6. And Ride 6 does come with some new content, some new gameplay modes and stuff like that. So let's just hope that Ride 6 is a bit more of a revolution than just an evolution. And of course there will be a 2026 MotoGP game to compare to that as well. So for now, stay tuned, stay safe, and hopefully I'll see you back soon for some proper riding videos where I can actually get out on two wheels. Take care, thanks for watching.